Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. We are so pleased to have people at this meeting from all parts of the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 17 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 265th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. We wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Project. For 264 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 5 years, 1 month and 1 week, we have featured 1,281 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 264 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are kindly asking for suggestions and volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. We wish to extend congratulations to Professor Betaram Ramharak for receiving a Guyana Prize for Literature in being shortlisted with citations for his book entitled 11 Dati. It's the story of Hari Prashad and Prashad Nagar. So let me introduce our moderator today, who is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thank you so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a warm welcome to you. Thanks so much for being here with us. This program is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. To avoid intrusions from trolls, our IT manager has muted everyone. So I'll appeal to all speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and don't allow anyone to share your screen. Thanks very much for your cooperation. For the second time, we are interrogating the question today, was Indian indentureship in the diaspora a success? A little bit about the system. The Indian indentureship system, which lasted from 1826 to 1920, was introduced as a labor replacement strategy following the abolition of slavery in the British Empire. During this period, over 1.2 million Indians were transported to various French, British, Dutch, Danish colonies, including Reunion Island, Mauritius, Fiji, British Guyana, which is now called Guyana, right here in Trinidad, South Africa, Suriname, and others, to work primarily on sugar plantations. The question of whether Indian indentureship in the diaspora was a success is complex and multifaceted. On one hand, indentured laborers and their descendants managed to preserve key elements of their cultural identity, contributed significantly to the economic, social, and political development of host countries, and established vibrant diaspora communities. On the other hand, the system itself was rooted in exploitation, marked by harsh working conditions, limited freedoms, and broken promises. While the legacy includes resilience and cultural endurance, it is also a reminder of the human cost of deceptive labor migration. To begin today's discussion, we start with Mauritius. I'll introduce you to Babita Bahadur. She has published several articles on the history of slavery and indentureship in Mauritius, and she's the author of the book entitled The History of a Sugar Estate in Mauritius. Welcome, Babita.
Hello, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So today I'm going to present on, let me share my screen. It's okay.
We're seeing your screen. We're seeing it much better now.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. I'm Babita Bahadur from Mauritius and presenting for the first time as an independent researcher in this forum. Before I start with my presentation on the assessment of the success of indentureship in Mauritius, I would like to thank Dr. Kumar Mahabir for inviting me on this platform. I also wish to congratulate the entire team of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center for their unfailing efforts and motivation in organizing this Thought Leaders Forum each Sunday, with a special thanks to Dr. Shakira Mohammed, chairperson, and Dr. Shalima, moderator of the ICC Forum. Thank you. So today we gather to reflect on an important chapter in the history of Mauritius, the indenture system, a labor migration phenomenon, also known as the Great Experiment, that shaped the island's demographic, cultural, and economic landscape. The question before us is not merely whether indentureship was successful, but how we measure that success through a historical lens. To evaluate this, we must consider the economic contributions, social transformations, and human cost of the system, while acknowledging the perspective of those who lived through it. Long before enslaved and apprentices were freed, the British colony of Mauritius had already started to witness the arrival of a small number of free laborers from Asia. This type of recruitment, which was initially a private undertaking, showed to a certain degree an attempt to test the viability of free labor as opposed to bonded workers. The Abolition Act of 1807 and the persistent allegations made by the anti-slavery movement regarding the illegal inflow of large contingents of slaves in the colony were among the main reasons which compelled the planters to test the alternative sources of labor. They anticipated that the abolition of slavery and the termination of apprenticeship would prove to be a setback for sugar, the colonial produce on which the economy depended. The sugar industry, the backbone of the island's economy, required a new workforce. The indenture system, brought over 450,000 laborers, mostly from India, but also from China. I think my slide is moving by itself. But also from China, Madagascar, and other regions of the Indian Ocean to work on plantations between 1828 and the early 20th century. These workers, known as indentured laborers, is there an issue with my PowerPoint, Shalima?
I think so. Did you set it for transitions?
So I didn't change, it's changing by itself.
Right, and the only way I think that can happen is if it was originally set up with transitions.
Okay. So these workers, known as indentured laborers, signed a contract of 5 years to work on the sugar plantations of Mauritius. This map shows the regions of the Indian Ocean where indentured laborers were recruited to work not only on the sugar plantations of Mauritius, but also in the infrastructure, ports, and other plantations like tea, tobacco, and so on. From an economic perspective, indentureship was undeniably transformative. The influx of laborers sustained and expanded Mauritius' sugar industry, positioning the island as one of the world's leading sugar exporters by the mid-19th century. Between 1840 and 1860, sugar production tripled, driven by the tireless work of indentured laborers. The system enabled plantation owners to maintain profitability while colonial government benefited from increased revenue and infrastructure development, including roads, railways, ports, and to support the industry. Indentured laborers also laid the foundation for Mauritius' economic diversification. Many, upon completing their contracts, choose to stay, acquiring small plots of land through savings or government schemes. The second half of the 19th century witnessed a major restructuring of the merchant sugar industry, a process best exemplified by the Grand Morcellement, where many plantation owners started to subdivide their holdings and sell small plots of land to Indian laborers, most of whom became cane farmers in their own right. The purchase of lands led to the formation of villages, which, according to Dave Virasamy, is today living memories of dead sugar estate from whom most of them, the villagers, still owe their names, is also a symbol of rich and heroic class struggles. He further adds that it was a form of resistance of class struggle for the coolies, indentured laborers, to live the tragic life of camps. By the 19th century, these former laborers and their descendants became small-scale farmers, traders, and entrepreneurs, contributing to the emergence of a vibrant, multi-ethnic middle class. This economic mobility suggests a degree of success as indentureship inadvertently fostered a legacy of resilience and adaptability.
Okay, Babita, 1 second,
Yeah.
please. I'm seeing on the screen that your PowerPoint has paused.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So this one is okay?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
Archival research demonstrates that even former indentured women or those who accompanied their husbands during the indentured era had the possibility to acquire land through the Morcellement. An analysis of notarial repertoires and deeds, like the NA and NB series of the National Archives Department of Mauritius, shows that many women were able to climb the socio-economic ladder through not only purchase of lands, but also through commercial activities by becoming small entrepreneurs. This is one case study of immigrant Soboi, who was a former immigrant from Madras, who came to Mauritius as an indentured worker in 1861 at the age of 19, and she was able to purchase a plot of land of half acres in Port Louis for the sum of only 100 rupees on 5th July 1892. Unfortunately, 2 months later, as per the archival records, she passed away in September. So as this immigrant Soboi, there were many other indentured immigrants, women who could purchase land after the terms of service. Beyond economics, the indenture system reshaped Mauritius' social fabric, creating the multicultural society we recognize today. The majority of indentured laborers were from India, bringing with them languages, religions, and traditions that enriched the island's cultural tapestry. Hindu temples, Muslim mosques, and Tamil festivals became integral to merchant identity, fostering a unique pluralism. The preservation of languages like Bhojpuri and Hindi, alongside the development of Mauritian Creole as a unifying tongue, highlights the enduring cultural contribution of indentured communities. As you can see, this is a popular festival in Mauritius, like the fireworking ceremony, which I captured in the eastern part of Mauritius. However, this cultural fusion was not without challenges. Indentured laborers often face social marginalization, living in rudimentary conditions on plantations and navigating a colonial hierarchy that privileged European settlers. Yet their descendants overcame these barriers, entering politics, education, and public life. The rise of figures like Sir Siu Saga Ramgoolam, a descendant of indentured laborers and Mauritius' first prime minister, underscores how indentureship indirectly empowered future generations to shape the nation's destiny. To fully evaluate the success of indentureship in Mauritius, we must confront its human toll. The system was often exploitative, with laborers enduring arduous work, meager wages, and harsh living conditions. Contracts were rigid, and breaches, such as absenteeism, could result in imprisonment as vagrants or fines. Many laborers were misled about the terms of the contracts, arriving in Mauritius with false expectations of prosperity. The journey itself across perilous Kalapani claimed countless lives due to disease, harsh treatment on board, and malnutrition. And even in Mauritius, many lost their lives due to the outbreak of the malaria epidemic between 1865 and 1867. To the indentured laborer himself, the laws pertaining to immigration and the indenture system were very often unclear because they only explain 1/3 of the term of the contract, such as working on a plantation against travel, wages, lodging, food, clothing, and basic provisions. For example, when he signed the contract, he was never informed of the terms of reimbursement for travel expenses to Mauritius and other similar terms, leaving him permanently indebted. One of the earliest laws regarding the indentured servants before the ban of emigration was Ordinance Number 16 of 1835, which questioned the system of free labor, as it clearly stipulated that a servant who refused to work, who engaged in various acts of misconduct, or who left his master before his contract had expired, could be fined or imprisoned. Moreover, the ordinance prohibited the laborer from changing the terms of contract or terminating his service. Allen argues that during the 1830s and early 1840s, indentured laborers had been subjected to laws which were designed to control the colony's apprentice and ex-apprentice populations, despite the fact that the Order of Council and Ordinance 11 of 1842 allowed for the resumption of immigration from India, as well as ensuring protection and certain rights to the immigrants. This was actually not the case. Section 19 of Order in Council, which allowed a laborer the right to choose his employer, was in practice denied to him. Due to limited time, I will not be able to cover all the ordinances regarding labor rights, but many of the ordinances enacted reflects the fact that legislation was most of the time in favor of the employers rather than the employees. Despite some of the advantages of the labor law, of 1867, such as the recovery of wages, many immigrants disapproved the enactment of this law, as according to them, it gave rise to serious abuses. The obligation of carrying a ticket, that is a pass system, was indeed harsh for the immigrant, as they were arrested and incarcerated if found without a ticket. Immigrants whose terms of contract had expired, especially all immigrants, had to register and apply for a new ticket with their photograph affixed on it against a payment of 2 shillings for the photograph. According to the Plevits, a sum nearly equal to 2 months' wages on a state when they had to pay for a ticket. Immigrants had to travel miles by foot to reach the immigration depot for the application of a new ticket, but were very often arrested on their way as vagrants without ticket, without being able to prove same. Moreover, indentureship was not a monolithic experience. Women who comprised a smaller but significant portion of laborers faced unique hardships, including gender-based discrimination and vulnerability to abuse and criminal acts. While some laborers achieved social mobility, others remained trapped in cycles of poverty. These realities compel us to question whether economic gains justify the suffering endured by so many. So how do we measure the success of indentureship? Evaluating the success of indentureship requires balancing its achievements against its shortcomings. Economically, the system was undeniably successful, sustaining and expanding the sugar industry of the island while laying the groundwork for diversification. Culturally and demographically, indentureship created a vibrant plural society that remains a cornerstone of Mauritius' identity. However, the exploitation and suffering endured by laborers cannot be overlooked. The system's reliance on coercive labor practices and its failure to prioritize worker welfare diminish its moral and social success. Comparatively, indentureship in Mauritius was more successful than in other colonies, such as Fiji or Guyana, where ethnic tensions and economic marginalization persisted longer. Mauritius' small size and early land ownership opportunities facilitated greater integration of indentured laborers. Nonetheless, the system's success was uneven, benefiting planters and the colonial economy more than the laborers themselves. In conclusion, indentureship in Mauritius was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. It was a system born of colonial necessity, driven by economic imperatives, and marked by both opportunity and oppression. Its legacy is evident in Mauritius' vibrant society and economy, but also in the stories of struggle and survival passed down through generations. As we reflect on this history, let us honor the contributions of indentured laborers while critically examining the systems that shaped their lives. The legacy challenges us to build a future that prioritizes justice, equity, and human dignity for all. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Excellent presentation, Babita. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Shalima.
One of the things that you all are very fortunate to have in Mauritius is a lot of those beautiful pictures. I think and in South Africa as well, there's quite a collection that we in the Caribbean do not have, unfortunately. So we're able to present, and Shani raised this, Shani Bullock from Jamaica, but I'm seeing now she's in St. Vincent. Shani, I agree with you totally. That particular slide, the one in which you were able, please go back, Babita. The one in which you were able to show the woman.
The one here?
Before this one, I think.
This one?
Right, I think it was this one. Or perhaps the one before. 43 concerns, 100 notarial deeds, 43 concerns, indentured women. So it led me to questioning one of the good things that came out of the Shani, this one in particular, one of the things that you mentioned was social mobility and economic improvements for women in particular, because they were able to become landowners. And perhaps somebody might be able to shed some light whether or not land ownership was denied women in India prior to coming across. Babita, do you know anything about this? Or is there anyone else in the audience who might be able to shed some light on that?
In India, I think that there was a peasant revolution in 1870 that pushed most inhabitants, residents to migrate toward different colonies in search of a better life. But in Mauritius, the advantage was that women, after completing the term of service, as per notarial deeds, have found that many of them could purchase land and even inherited land through their husbands. So the husband would buy the land, and later when he would pass away, it will be inherited by the wife. And also I saw that women could also sell portions of lands. They were doing like land transactions, which I didn't find. I mean, I need to do a comparative analysis in other British colonies, but for Mauritius, I found this in the archival sources, which has not been mentioned in literature, except that Marina Carter did mention about land purchased by women and also by becoming entrepreneurs.
Right. But I think they would have to prove their marital status. And were there marriages that were registered by law in Mauritius among the immigrants?
Yeah, we do have the marriage certificate. I have my colleague here, Satyendra, who has done a lot of research on same. So we do have marriage certificates for the Indian immigrants, the women, men, and also there were women who were widowed. They also could purchase land. There was no need to have a certificate, a marriage certificate, to purchase land.
African slavery in Mauritius.
Okay. All right, so let me just pause there. Dr. Roseanne Kanhai has a question for you.
Yeah.
Dr. Kanhai, go ahead, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, okay. So I think that it seems that Mauritius has had several layers of colonialism by, I think, the Netherlands, the French, and the British. They've also had layers of plantation labor from Africa and from India. And I wondered if the speaker can address, when the Indians came, what kind of social structure there was. Like, how did they relate to other ethnic groups that were already there? You know, either who the French brought or the British brought. What were the social relationships, and what were issues? How were they resolved? Can you speak to that?
Regarding the other ethnic groups that you mean in Mauritius during the slavery period, that many enslaved workers were brought in Mauritius, and then after the abolition of slavery, with the indentured laborers coming from India, the majority of them, not only from India, but also from other regions of the Indian Oceans. We do have how do we say it? The civil status records presenting that there were intermarriage between the former enslaved workers and also the indentured laborers who came, or free immigrants. Because the population, we didn't only have enslaved workers or indentured laborers, but also free immigrants who came to settle. And later they got married, like you have the Chinese traders who came here, some who settled, and they got married with les gens de couleur, the colored people, all the former enslaved workers. So there were intermarriage, and this is how later on the statistics, the census would the slave population, the enslaved workers population, or the apprentice population would be merged into what was known as the general population. So they did they did mixed, like, I think I answered your question, or
Yeah, well, because coming from Trinidad, which I know best, there's been, I guess, tension or conflict between various groups, the various ethnic groups, and more so between those who came from Africa and those who came from India. And I'm wondering if that was the situation or is the situation as Mauritius as well, and how it's being worked through. If you can touch on that, I'd appreciate it.
like you mean to
I
say?
think that's part of the success. To talk about the success of indentureship, I think that's part of it. How people settled, what happened over the last 200 years, how people get along with each other, how they work together or don't work together. How I think that's part of the success or lack of success that I would like to, bring into this discussion.
Well, as per the visitor's account, like Milbert, he described that the Indian workers who were here on the island, and even the enslaved workers, they were docile, they were working. There was there was some tension between masters and servants, as they mentioned. But this population, especially the workers, it seems that there was a good interaction between them. However, when I did my research regarding crimes and punishment, I saw that there was a very records of crimes, suicides, etc. But the British allowed that the indentured laborers or former enslaved workers could practice their religion, the culture. There were no barriers to that.
Okay.
That's why today, the descendants, we have temples, covils dating back to the 19th century. Even in the press, they mentioned about the processions. So there was not that culture tension.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Thank you very much. So we have a second question from MK. Mohammed Keshavji, go ahead, please.
Wasn't Roseanne before me, or is she finished?
Yes, I'm finished. Yes.
Thank
Or
you,
is
Dr. Khan.
Roseanne okay. Babita, I just wanted to ask you one question, that in South Africa, the Muslims who came in the early days came via Mauritius, and a large Tamil community also that became very prominent in South Africa, particularly in the Transvaal, came through Mauritius in the 1860s, 1870s. What was the push and the pull behind that? Why did the Mauritian Indians decide to come to South Africa? Could you throw some light on that?
Actually, what I have done my research on, many indentured laborers transited in Mauritius to go to other British colonies. And also there were lots of free passengers. As per the Z2D series of the National Archives Department, we have a list of free passengers. Many were traders, and especially the families from India. They had some of the siblings coming to Mauritius and others migrating towards South Africa. So they wanted to keep these family ties. And still, even today, when I went to do a survey in the capital city of Port Louis with the trading communities, they still have a tie, a link. They are connected with their families in India and even in South Africa. So this family tie still bonded. They still keep this relationship since the 19th century. That is why, from my observation, from my perspective, I think that this is why there's this link, you know, between South Africa, Mauritius, and India because of commercial activities, and also because of indentured laborers transiting in Mauritius with families staying here in Mauritius, and then some of them going to South Africa. Because, you know, sometimes in India, even the agents that were recruiting the indentured laborers, the indentured laborers themselves didn't know where they were going. They were just in search of better lives, migrating to a country that was not unknown to them. Hello?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so this is how, as per my observation, I'm still doing research on the descendants of the trading communities, as well as descendants of indentured laborers. But the tie is mostly from the commercial part, the free passengers. They still keep this family connection in India, Gujarat, South Africa, and also in Mauritius.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Babita.
Welcome.
Terrific. And we have a question as well from Krishna Padayachi. Krishna, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
You're
good
audible.
afternoon.
Well, yes, I can attest to this relationship between Mauritians and South Africans. My grandmother is Mauritian, but apart from that, one of the things I'd like to talk about is in Mauritius, amongst the indentured population, is alcoholism a social evil? Is it a significant social evil? You find alcoholism present in other parts of the world where there's been indentured laborers. And this has been, a cause of concern for a lot of people in those particular countries. Now, in Mauritius itself, is large-scale alcoholism, wife abuse, an issue?
Okay,
In
thank you for the
Mauritius?
question. Babita, did you get that?
Yeah, what I understood is that was the alcohol a social evil during the indenture period, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually during the indenture period, that there is a researcher who have done mostly on the, how do we call this? Has done a research on not alcohol, but I don't think this was a social evil, but most of the time there were laws that passed, were enacted, that they had to, how do we say this, that they had to act like in a proper manner. We cannot get drunk, but the visitors' account during the slavery period say that the enslaved laborers used to take alcohols, like whenever they would get a small savings, but this was considered as being social evil. But now what I'm doing research is especially on like the datura. They were using this plant to do criminal crimes, to steal from the indentured laborers. So this is from the criminal records of the archives.
Okay.
And alcohol also, I found some of them, the cases where they were intoxicated, but then they become victims of robberies or even murder.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a question still to be evaluated. Dr. Kanhai is asking again, how do we evaluate success if there are, or perhaps is there developed pathologies such as alcoholism, domestic violence, etc.? So that's another issue that we have to raise
Yeah,
at a
that's
later
true.
date, perhaps.
Mhm.
So Babita, one more question for you, and this is from Chand, who is originally from Fiji. Chand is asking, was land purchased outright or leased from the natives? And she's contextualizing that here by saying, in Fiji, the land was leased by free committees for periods of 30 years and had to be renewed. Later, it was reduced to 10 years for a while.
Okay, in Mauritius, you have during the Grand Morcellement process, parcelization of lands, the former indentured laborers could purchase land. The second was a lease one, like I did my research on Brado, the former sugar state of Brado. So they used to lease lands to former indentured laborers for plantations, using the land for rearing
Pastorals.
animals. So it was both. So the law permitted that they could purchase as well as lease crown lands, as it was known.
Right, but that was British law. Who could they have leased from? Was it, did natives own the land? Could they purchase only from the colonial government? Who could they purchase or lease from?
Actually, the natives, the planters, like the bourgeoisie, they own land. When there was the centralization process of sugar estate, and especially the movement of the morcellement of lands, so they would sell small plots of lands to the former indentured laborers who could afford purchasing. And secondly, you have also the natives, like the even Indian farmers who lease their lands to the smaller planters, smaller farmers for plantation. And through this, they could gain their lives like small entrepreneur, cultivating other types of crops and even rearing animals. So it was on both sides, and even the British government would lease lands to the small planters.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Babita. Very interesting.
welcome.
And your contribution via the questions, really invaluable. Thank you again.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you for the first time. Let's hope it's not the last.
No. You should invite me more on different
we will.
topics and platforms.
We will. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
So we are moving on now to our second speaker, and this is Shameen Thakur Rajbansi from South Africa. She's a political leader and former long-serving member of the KwaZulu-Natal legislature. She's also an authoritative voice on South African Indian heritage, and we're very happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Very good evening to one and all. Well, this is my second time on this chat. I think the last was when we had the riots in South Africa. Correct. I had done a presentation then, yeah. So it's really good to be back, and I want to thank Dr. Mahabir and the whole team for giving me this opportunity. Since it's part 2 of the topic, I think that, I hope that I have an approach that will encourage more debate around the aspects of my presentation. But of course, to start off on this topic, it's very important for us to first define success. And I think I'd go on to slide 2. Right, I think we can move to slide 2. Yeah, so I think that we can start with the definition of success. And for me, that means that, I found this definition very appropriate. And that is that success depends on 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we respond. Now, why I felt that this was important to assume this kind of definition was because, I had grown up to get to know my grandfather, who had come from UP. And I was 14 years old and he was 103 years old when he had passed on. So I remember every evening he would talk to me about India and, his longing to go back and even see his village that he had come from, which was a sugarcane village. But then he'd always explain to me about the challenges that he faced in South Africa because he had worked in the coal mines and had become sandblind. And therefore, he always impressed upon me, how hard we have to work if we have to survive challenges in South Africa. So therefore, I think that when our forefathers had come in 1860, they must have had this sort of win-win attitude, because remember, they were promised all this wealth and all this prosperity in a foreign land by their masters. So I think we go on to slide 3. And in this slide, I wanted to utilize the fishbone diagram because I think that it's a very simple diagram of cause and effect if we want to understand an issue and how to approach a question given. So I decided to do this one on Indian indenture in colonial South Africa, but at the beginning. So we could get the cause right and then work forwards. So when you look at the fishbone, it's got the 4 M's of the manpower, method, money, and material. And this then explains that 1860 situation and what led to indenture. And the fact that Gandhiji had said that indenture was actually an offspring of slavery. When you look at the diagram then, looking at the cause, you'll find that it was the poor socioeconomic conditions of Indian people at that time, and India itself was a British colony. But then, of course, on the South African side, it was an economic opportunity for the British settlers over here. If I had to classify then in that context, manpower, it would have been the Indian slave labor. The method would have been the indenture contracts. The money would have been money by British slave masters. The materials, of course, would have been the farms and the mines that they possessed. And then when we look at the effect of these 4 M's eventually, you will find that for the British Empire, it was enrichment. But for South African Indians, we became part of the South African Indian diaspora. In terms of outcomes, and the reason why I'm putting partial success here is because that would lead me on to the other discussions that are to come. And that's because this is a partial success if we look at it through the eyes of the laborers themselves and, of course, their descendants even currently. So go on to the next slide of timelines. And so if I could have slide 4. So in the South African context, it's very important to look at these timelines. And I feel that these pictures explain, where we've come from and where we're going. So in 44 AD, where we had the Khoisan people that always lived here. They were the original people from here. And coming right to 1834, it was a time when you had the Slavery Abolition Act. If we can have slide 5. And these timelines that I'm giving are very important to consider because it actually shows the impact of foreign settlers in South Africa and of the socioeconomic opportunities that, fostered even our political dispensations, and even the importance of the original people, the Khoisan, their rights that we also have to consider. If you look at slide 5 then, we have in 1860 the arrival of Indian endangered people. But in 1869, a few years later, you had the passenger Indian arrivals, which were the traders. And then in 1893, Mahatma Gandhi arrived in South Africa, and he, as we all know, had come to actually fight a commercial court case for one of the traders. But when he was here, within a year, he had realized at that time the amount of discrimination that was people were affected by, and that is why in 1894 he formed the NIC. Because he realized that Indian people needed, a political voice. Thereafter, we go on to the next slide, slide 6. So here we had in 1895 we had the £3 poll tax that was enacted, and this was by British standard it was this capitation tax. Then in 1896, Gandhiji went back to India for a short while to bring his family and to also alert, Indian leaders about the discrimination that Indian people were facing here. Of course, in around 1902, South Africa's republic was dissolved, and in 1910, we actually then became South Africa became a union, the Union of South Africa, which actually brought together an amalgamation of uniting 4 of the British colonies and the Boer republics. And this system then became a system of white self-rule, and blacks were excluded. So, and blacks would mean Indians and Black Africans and colored people. So that was the beginning of white rule and domination by the British, because South Africa had become a dominion of the British Empire. And then in 1911, in 1911 we had the last ship coming into South Africa, bringing in endangered people. And it's because of the sensitization of how people were being ill-treated here. In 1913, also something very important happened. And I don't have it on the slide, but it's an important thing, actually, because my grandfather, as I said, was a coal miner, and he worked in Burnside, which is just outside Newcastle. And at that time, Gandhiji had visited the coal miners, and he wanted help from them. And that's how they had this passive resistance march. And the coal miners were actually used to march from Newcastle to Falkirk, which is in Transvaal, because they wanted, an abolition of discriminatory laws, especially for the movement of people, because even the traders who had come wanted to move to Transvaal, and movement was being restricted. So they had this march, and it was successful because in 1914, even the poll tax was abolished. Then Gandhiji returned to India in 1915, and at that time, of course, World War I had started from 1914 to 1918. If you can give me the next slide. So this slide then shows how we had another regime change, and the apartheid government had come into the fore. That was from 1948 to 1994, and this was an Afrikaner minority-ruled government. And thereafter, in 1961, we became a republic where the British left and, they formally seized political control. Then in 1984, which was during the part of apartheid, from 1984 to 1999, we had the tricameral parliament. And this was the opening up of the parliament to other race groups. And then we had democracy, which had come with the end of apartheid in 1994 till, well, now. We'll go on to the next slide. Slide 8. So I wanted to look at population because I feel that, if I look at success of endangered people through a political lens, then in politics, you must remember that, population or demographics actually rules. And therefore, it's of interest. From 1860 to 1911, there was 150,000 indentured Indians that had come to South Africa. So if you look from 1912 to 2025, today, our population is 1.56 million Indians. So that's not a huge increase in population. We only make up 2.6% of the population of 63.21 million people in South Africa, according to the 2023 stats that I have. Can I have slide 9? So the other thing that's important is if we look at ourselves currently and to do this assessment of success, we have to also think, where are we now? And for me, that means that you have to start focusing on goals because we always have to, people generally have like a 5-year goal, etc. But I think sometimes when you look at a community, a whole community, you have to think about goals in longer terms. You look at the Indian goals timeline. So if you look at periods and centuries, our forefathers came here in 1860. So by 1960, that was 100 years. 1961 to when we get to 2060, that'll be another 100 years. So that'll be 2 centuries of us living here. Currently, when you look at the African continent, and then you look at Indians in that, you have to look at alignment. From 2025, which is this year, to 2060, which will give us the 2 centuries of living here, it's 35 years to go. And Indian people, currently, they have aspirations. And same with the African communities, because we have the African Union, and the African Union has Agenda 2063. So for us as Africans as well, we have 38 years more to go for realizing African aspirations. So if you look at this in context as an African Indian now, we have a very limited, like 3 to 4 decade odd period to align our aspirations. And then you look at India. India got freedom in 1948. And they have aspirations as well to become a developed country. So they, to 2048, which the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji now has, the aspirations of Viksit Bharat and becoming a developed nation. So that is Indian goals. But from 2025 to 2048, there's 23 more years for the Indian government to actually accomplish even those goals. So when we look at it as people in the diaspora, we have to also question ourselves, where do we fit in with all this, with our African 2063 agenda, with India's 2048 agenda? And we have to think about these things carefully when we consider our success overall as people coming from endangered stock. So the above is also a background to reaching consensus about our success, and I have therefore used another technique to try to answer this question. So if we can have slide 10. Well, I've used a pestle analysis. I'm sure many of you researchers out here, and you understand this analysis framework. It actually has a few dimensions or factors that are very important when you look at things on a macroeconomic point of view. Because remember, Indian labor was actually for traders, and it was for economic purposes. So therefore, I use this because I thought that it will give us a better idea of where we've come from and where we need to go. So the first table that I did was given the scenario of 1860, as it was maybe in that time period. So if you look at it politically, it was colonial rule, and there you had racial segregation as a foundation. That was the setting of racial discrimination. Then if you look at the economic factor, it was about the cheap labor demand, and even coming from that, you got still post-indenture poverty, because that still left a lot of people in the low socioeconomic strata. If you look at technology, well, most of them worked in the agricultural sector, the mining sector. So technology was very rudimentary at that time because it was mainly manual labor. But if you look at skills, then for that reason, there was no skills transfer during that period. On the legal side, the laborers, of course, had exploitative contracts, but they were promised repatriation and going back. But of course, the repatriation clause was one of manipulation. So, and you all remember now the burden of the three-pole tax as well. So no one could save in this system to actually even pay their way and go back. And when you look at the environmental factor, even because of the types of work they were doing, the laborers were subjected to tropical diseases and very hard conditions. For example, even my grandfather, he had become sandblind because, they had no protective gear for their eyes when working in the mine. So he basically never saw us. He just could see the outline of a figure, but he couldn't actually see anything else. And then, of course, there was environmental degradation because of the sugar industry and, just the fact that the laborers had to bear the brunt of all that anyway. So the summary of this pestle framework in 1860 would show that indentured Indians were systematically exploited, both economically and socially, under colonial structures. However, despite these harsh conditions, they built strong cultural and community foundations in South Africa, which still continue to shape the identity and contributions of our descendants today. And I just want to speak one more thing about aspirations. And I strongly feel that, we have to start thinking about an aspirational document as we approach the coming of a second century for descendants. And we have to also have a 35-year plan of action. And I've read many books recently about reconciliation and manifestos that are being produced elsewhere by other descendants whose ancestors were exploited. And there's so many demands being made to, for example, the Canadian government, etc. So I think that these are things that we need to think about, and pestle analysis is a very good tool to use to make those arguments. So I'd like to go on to the second pestle table, which is slide 11. And slide 11, I did this analysis for 2025. So today, where we are with the same 5 factors. So you use, well, when you look at it politically, and these are now contemporary issues, we now have a constitutional democracy. We have freedom, we have democracy, and yet we have policy marginalization, and we have limited voice even in terms of reparations. So these are the challenges that we face politically. Economically, we've had the emergence of a middle-class society, and the fact that Indian people, they've done very well in entrepreneurship, in different professions, whether it's medicine or law or education. And but the thing is that we have persistent inequality, and we have to find a way to have targeted economic redress, especially through an indenture policy, just like the way you have land restitution, etc., for other groups. And this is because we have been also affected by apartheid. And during apartheid, we had like group areas. So if I look at the way Indian people have had to be moved and displaced in South Africa, we have just moved and moved and moved, and just through different policies by the different governments. Socially, of course, we have cultural preservation and adaptation, and that's always been our very strong point. And even today, and that's because our forefathers, they built the temples, the mosques, and so many community structures. And they did this mainly through self-help during colonial rule. They didn't do it because any government gave it to them. And only later, we started getting some help. But most of the things came from people working and the communities putting money together to do these things for themselves. Today in democracy, we have social cohesion programs to try to bridge the crossroads between different racial groups. But of course, we also have policies that are now becoming counterproductive, that are actually racially dividing people. So that's a very difficult thing. And yet it's in our country's National Development Plan of 2030. And for that, we only have about 4.5 years to reach those goals. And one of the major things is social cohesion. And, it's one of the things that we have to assess how far we've come as the Indian community to actually socially integrate with all other communities. Technologically, there's digital inclusion now. There's just a little bit of gap, and that's mainly in the rural areas. But you find that a lot of Indian people live in the urbanized areas, so they're quite well equipped technologically. Legally, there's equal protection under the law because we have a Bill of Rights in our Constitution, and this gives us full citizenship. But somehow there's no legal recognition for indentured trauma. It never came out in any kind of during the TRC, etc. So these things still have to be dealt with somewhere along the line. Also in South Africa, we have many race-based policies which are excluding a lot of people of Indian origin, like your triple BE, etc. And yet, somehow you would have thought that given our hardships and the manner in which we had finally come to be in South Africa, we would have been maybe classified under the previously disadvantaged. Then environmentally, you find that there is an urban development impact, and that's because many of our townships are, they highly urbanized. Very few are semi-rural and very little rural. So we have huge townships like Chatsworth and Phoenix, and other townships in other provinces as well, where there's a lot of Indian people that live in these. But of course, there are gaps, and especially when it comes to environmental care and the way spatial planning was done. And so we don't have a lot of large green lung spaces where Indian people reside. So the summary of the 2025 PESTLE framework would be that despite constitutional rights and socioeconomic mobility, the descendants of indentured Indians still face identity tension, under recognition of historical trauma and limited target policy support. However, our people have exhibited resilience, strong cultural cohesion, and increasing participation in the economy and technological sectors. I'd like to now go on to slide 12. Okay, so slide 12, here I did a comparison PESTLE framework, and that is 1860 put together with 2025, because that gives us like 165 years. So this November 16th, we'll be commemorating 165 years of the arrival of Indian indentured people. And if you look at these 5 factors put next to each other, it gives you a clearer picture of what are the major differences in under British colonial rule and now democracy. So if you look at 1860, we had no representation of political rights, and we just had all kinds of segregation laws. In 2025, we have full citizenship, but we are underrepresented in national politics. If you look at the economic section, 1860 it was cheap labor, and 2025 it's middle class growth, but no direct reparations or economic redress. If you look at the social aspect, we in 1860 our forefathers were dislocated from their homeland and their families, and but today, 2025, we have a very strong cultural identity, and this is because of people sticking together just to survive so many challenges that they've had to face. Technologically, in 1860, it was manual labor, as I said, but today we do have high access to technology. Legally, that system was exploitative contracts. Today, we do have constitutional protection. We have labor laws. We have a lot of programs. But unfortunately, the impact of these programs that the government offers today, that impact varies. And environmentally, in the past, in the 1860s, people lived in poor disease prone barracks and very harsh plantation conditions. They had no land ownership and no environmental agency. But today, people do live in urbanized townships. But when you look at these townships too, the way in which was built, the type of lands that were given to Indian people, these lands are very vulnerable to floods, to poor infrastructure, and most of the disasters that are occurring now, the climate change disasters, are hurting Indian areas. You will see just last year we had the tornado, and that affected Tongaat. So Indian areas, unfortunately, this is how they were spatially arranged. The interpretation of this comparison is that in 1860, life under indenture was harsh exploitative, and dehumanizing across all dimensions of pestle. But in 2025, there's substantial progress politically, economically, socially, but historical disadvantages and a lack of targeted redress continue to shape our Indian community's journey in South Africa. If I can have the next slide. So this
Ma'am,
slide is the final.
Ma'am, may I interrupt you? Can you please make your
Yeah.
closing comments very quickly? We've already gone over
Okay.
by 5 minutes.
All
Thanks.
right. So this dimension on the assessment is actually just showing you across those 5 dimensions what were the failures and what were the successes. And most of it is coming up as partial successes, and that's why that fishbone diagram. So if I had to answer the question on why was indenture in the diaspora a success, it will give you a nuanced answer, and a historically conscious response. And based on the pestle analysis and the 1860 to 2025 comparison, a fair and a balanced assessment is that Indian indenture was not a success in its original form, but its long-term legacy contains elements of resilience, cultural preservation, and community development, which has shaped a successful and vibrant South African Indian community. And a balanced perspective is that Indian indenture was not a success if it's judged by the well-being, freedom, and dignity of the laborers. The system was designed for exploitation and not upliftment. However, it's a long-term legacy that has actually evolved into relative success, thanks not to the system itself, but to the resilience and adaptability and cultural strength of the Indian community in South Africa. And the descendants have made significant contributions in politics, economy, education, health, culture, sports achievements, and they have triumphed over this oppressive system. So the final verdict is Indian indenture was a historical injustice, a failure in its intent and implementation, yet its legacy can be seen as a success story of human survival, identity preservation, and immense contributions shaped not by the political systems, but the people who endured it. And in recommendations, I just want to give 3 recommendations, and that is increased political activism and participation. Secondly, the Indian policy focus, which must be 3-pronged for full citizenship rights in South Africa because of the discriminatory quota systems that we now face, the dual citizenship rights in India because there is a Girmetia conference coming up in 2027, and reparations, of course, from the UK side of compensation for each of those families and an apology. And thirdly, recognition awards from the Indian government for indentured Indians with the civilian awards that are given in India. And I think that these things will go a long way. The last things that I have, and if you go through the rest of the slides quickly, are basically pictures of what we have done in South Africa, some pictures of what we've done to always annually commemorate the arrival of Indian indentured people every 16th of November. So with these words, I'd like to thank you, and let's see what questions come.
Thank you very much. I have a couple things I would like to ask, but in the interest of time, I think I will just take the questions very quickly from the 2 persons with their hands raised. We do have another speaker that we would like to bring on very shortly. So let me take a question, please, from Baba. Go ahead, please, Dr. Shadanand. You'll need to unmute your mic. Dr. Shadanand?
Let's go to Ranbir because he's not unmuting.
Ranbir, let's have your question, please.
Hi, Shameem, thanks so much. And great presentation, Shameem. I just want to ask you, have the Indians always been caught between various factions? I mean, Mahatma Gandhi fought discrimination by whites, mostly English speakers in Natal, but Indians themselves were attacked in 1949, the Cato Manorites, largely by Zulus, cheered on by whites. Then people like Amjad Rajbansi were accused of collaborating because they joined the tricameral parliament of P.W. Botha. And now we've got Julius Malema, who's now attacking Indians as well. So, attacked from all sides, really.
Yeah, sorry, what was the main thrust of that question?
Well, it isn't just discrimination by whites, it's discrimination by all sides. So while there was discrimination that Mahatma Gandhi fought, that indentured labourers were facing, and Indians in general, like we got thrown off that train, there was also attacks by African community, like Cato Manor riots, now by Julius Malema, and attacks on people like Amjad Rajbansi for joining the P.W. Botha's tricameral parliament that he tried out with the reforms.
Yeah, so the Indian people, every 35 years it looked like, from the Cato Manor riots, and you had the Inanda riots, then you had the 2021 Durban riots, you will find that every 35 odd years a riot had come, whether it was in the time when there was just white rule, whether there was the time when there was apartheid, or now in democracy. And every time it is the Indian community that has had to bear the brunt of these riots. So it is a 35-year thing that happens in the Indian community, and always it is politically orchestrated. I can speak for this current riots. The Inanda riots, I was from Northern Natal. I was not part of it. I know Mr. Rajbansi did a lot to help the Inanda victims. He was in the TRICAM at that time. Today, even the Inanda people, not all of them have got justice. And Mr. Rajbansi fought very hard for restitution in those cases. Some of them got help. He even housed the people that got displaced from there in Unit 20 in Caneside in Phoenix. And now these riots have occurred recently, and it occurred in the Phoenix area, again in the same area of the bordering Inanda community and the Phoenix community. And again, there's allegations of, who may have caused it, for what reasons they caused it. I was in Parliament in the last term. From that time right till the time we left Parliament, we were drafting all kinds of documents. Even it went to the Human Rights Commission about who could have caused this. And we can never point a finger, no matter which government system it was, whenever there was a riot against Indian people. And that's how it is. But I think when people write, maybe do more research on each of the riots, we can only guess politically who were the actual people behind those riots, because it happens to the Indian community all the time.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for that response. Dr. Shardanan, last question for Shamin Thakur Rajbansi. Please unmute your mic. Dr. Shardanan? Oh, we see.
He can't. Oh.
Okay, there we go.
You have closed me.
Good question. Go ahead.
You have to unmute me.
Yes, you are unmuted. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me be very, very brief. This, ma'am, my compliment to you. That is science of the meteorology. And may I invite you, ma'am, to come in our board. Listen, you have mentioned Mahatma Gandhi ji. In India, they're calling he was indentured labor. He said, no, he was not indentured labor. As you told here, he came just for the court cast. So, when he left South Africa, going to Bharat, make Bharat independence, the same Gandhi, he had seen the injustice against the indentured labor, but when defendants came there, no of them have mentioned the indentured labor and their descendants. That was my closing remark on my master class last in the University of Lucknow. बड़ी गड़बड़ बात है. That is very discutable. He didn't mention. Ma'am, what do you think about? Bolo.
I think, you know, a lot of our history of indentured people, even in South Africa, is not actually written by indentured people. So my encouragement to a lot of South Africans that come from indentured stock is that it's about time that we must start writing our own history, doing research.
That was
Yeah,
not
yeah,
my question. Excuse me.
I know, but that's what I'm coming to. And why we must do this research and write it from our own perspective is, like you are rightfully saying, in India, if this message was taken back about and really had to make a difference in the polity there about the sufferings of our people and how we should have been given many opportunities to be repatriated, etc., things would have been much better for us. Today, we face so many difficulties of OCI cards, etc. And that is why I'm looking forward to the Girmitia conference of 2027 with Sri Narendra Modi ji, because it'll be one platform at which Indians in the diaspora can actually come and tell their own story, and maybe what was left out by Gandhiji in terms of communicating a lot of our hardships and even the fact that we got dislocated from the motherland. At least we can do it at this conference, because I'll tell you one more thing. In 2003, Vajpayee ji had come to South Africa, and I was very privileged to have a 10-minute conversation with him and my late husband. And it was, my late husband had asked for one thing, and that was that we should have dual citizenship with India. The indentured people should have this dual citizenship. But at that time, there were protests even on the streets of Durban, and some people said, no, but we don't need that. And so the thing is that all these things have to be put into perspective. Today, you find that people, British people, even in South Africa, they have dual citizenship, and yet they came as settlers, and we came as, you know, people being displaced for labor. So the thing is that I think the rights today of people all over the world must be recognized, and it's not too late though, that even if these things were overlooked and maybe we didn't have full justice in so many ways, but we have to now do it for ourselves, and we have to talk at different platforms and get our voices heard. Yeah.
We have the platform.
Thank you.
Maybe Salima ma'am can inform you. Maybe, and if you want, you can notice the July 5, we'll have a hybrid symposium with Bharati and all over the world in Sutermeer. Ask Salima, she has all details, and she is one of the member of my board, the Inter-University, and I'm inviting you to be one of the board member, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will speak to Shalima.
Acha.
Thank you. Acha. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wait, you we are not hearing you.
Can you hear me?
No. Shalima, we are not hearing her. Your mic is muted. Yes.
Are you hearing me now?
No, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Thakur Rajbansi. I just want to remind everyone that we'll be having a conference in South Africa in August of this year, 2025, August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I hope we can continue with this conversation at that point in time. Thanks again. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring on our third and final speaker, and this is Dr. Balasubramaniam Chandra Mohan from England. He has conducted extensive research on indentured labor migration from India, consulting archives in India, South Africa, the UK, and Australia. Welcome, Dr. Bala.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. Okay, we'll probably start with the slides. If you could go to the
Sure.
first slide, please. Okay, it's just my details, but the main thing is the question was Indian indentureship. How do you assess that?
Yeah.
So what I have done is, oh, sorry, it's got the, I think we have jumped one slide. Before that, there should be a definition slide. Next one. The one after that should begin with the definitions in diaspora.
Just advance one more.
Yeah, advance one more, please. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. When I was invited to contribute to this session, I tried to, in a very academic way, unpack some of the definitions or some of the complexities that arise because of the definitions of particular terms. And two specific terms in our case are the diaspora and success. So these are two basic topics, so to speak. So I took up the case of this diaspora, the definitions of diaspora, because one of the things that we find is that the diaspora as a concept, as a short term, as an expression of convenience, masks several categories within that. So I thought, at least we should separate them by categories, and then we can then analyze or look at each of them, or at least the category that we are looking at, that is indentured labor, and the diaspora in relation to indentured labor. So the idea of diaspora originally is that the Jewish population was expelled, and so they have probably historically been first in that particular, historically been displaced, and therefore the term diaspora has been associated with that particular dislocation for a long time, or it's still there. And then there is also the idea of diaspora as a voluntary movement under indentured contracts from the Indian subcontinent. This is what we have been discussing in my previous speaker, very eloquently mentioned about the contracts and why they were not voluntary, and what happened in the case of South Africa. Now, the third definition is movement from Indian. Diaspora is also used to indicate a movement from Indian subcontinent during British colonial rule for the project, construction, agricultural work, or business providing services in other colonies. So this is another type of definition where we have been using diaspora to not only indicate the migration in relation to sugarcane plantations or even coal mines, but for a variety of other labor requirements the colony in other places. So this movement is not necessarily limited to, although it began with that, not necessarily limited to sugarcane plantations or in some cases mines. Then another group for which the diaspora's definition is used is remigration from the original colonial location to other British European colonies. Now we talked about the remigration from Mauritius to South Africa, but that process has been ongoing for several years. But also more recently, with more travel, etc., we find remigrations of people have taken place, and to what extent this diaspora, the original diaspora, so to speak, would apply to these particular groupings. Then the last category is general post-independence movement of people for economic or social advancement. So I went to the library just to check, what are the titles of books on diaspora. And you find quite a lot of diaspora of Punjabis in northwestern India or northwest Britain, or connecting the two places. And these two places which you find where the expression of diaspora is used is very little to do with the original diaspora, either in the sense of Jewish diaspora or in the sense of diaspora associated with the contracts that we were talking about. So my conclusion at this particular point is, when we are using these particular definitions, we need to be a bit more pointed or careful in looking at whether it was successful or not. So the first point is we need to disaggregate the use of word diaspora in order to find out whether it has been successful or not. So I would discuss in the rest of the presentation, I would take the idea of number 2, that is the so-called voluntary movement under the indentured contracts from Indian subcontinent. That will be my focus, although I try to separate the different types of diaspora. We'll come back to this in the discussion if necessary. Now, using this item number 2, let's look at what success means. Next slide, please. Oh, there's a note here which I want to mention here, is that slavery is considered as a different category from diaspora. Very often you find slavery being used separately, and transatlantic slavery in particular attracts a lot more scrutiny and a lot more research as compared with the indentured labor movement. And the key point I'm stressing is that the two had significant aspects of unfreedom that were very similar, but then they are categorically seen as different. So although the similarities are very much stressed by this expression that indenture was a new form of slavery. In other words, there are certain, they may be different in form, but they have certain essential qualities which overlap and which are similar. But the main point is that that they are institutionalized, and also this idea of unfreedom, that the freedom was denied in terms of movement, in terms of just wages, in terms of social equality, etc. So in other words, in both cases, the unfreedom is a crucial element, and therefore they're together, but also they're different. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm coming to this question of dimensions of success. When we use the word success, how do we look at success? What defines success, especially in the case of indentured labor? Now, I come up with sort of 3 criteria, so to speak. How fast in terms of generations the indentured population in a specific colonial, post-colonial context negotiates the structure of colonial inequalities using the agency of individual and collective resilience. Now, we talked about how the indentured labor made rapid progress, though there are some limitations at that particular point in the previous presentation. So here again, I'm using these words structure and agency. These are typical paradigm definitions in terms of development, that there is a structure which is facilitating or which is obstructive, or there is an agency which is pushing against a particular structure through effort. So here is a structure which could be, which has been in this particular case very oppressive, but also very frustrating. But at the same time, that doesn't stop the agency of the person affected, of the individuals here, whether it is in terms of gender, in terms of class. But this particular agency has been able to push through the structure, and therefore, when it does, and that would be success. And how fast has this happened? Now, the time frame that we're using is not particular cutoff periods, but I was looking in terms of generations, because generationally speaking, the indentured labor came with certain specific aspects which they had to overcome in order to progress to the next level of success in terms of generations. So, for example, learning English, for example, learning another language in this particular case. That was one of the things. And and there are several cases where grandmothers used to learn from grandchildren in order to sell things, in order to be in informal markets. So what we find here is that the progress could be measured in terms of generations rather than specific dates. So I'm using these generations as a particular time frame. Then second criteria for success: how far did the indentured population preserve cultural and social aspects of the communities they came from? Now, very often you find that success could be in terms of self-definition, so in terms of self-pride, in terms of self-awareness. So that particular self-awareness is very crucial for any particular population. A population that forgets history will also forget the present. So to that extent, the preservation of cultural and social aspects is very crucial for any community. And in that particular sense, how far have the indentured population in different regions been able to preserve cultural, social aspects? And many of the seminars that we have on this particular platform look at generational aspects, but also look at music, religion, etc. So, to what extent preserving these particular qualities is can be seen as success? So is that that's another criteria. And the third criteria which I'm using is how far the indentured population managed to survive, negotiate the tensions of ethnic, racial sandwiching between shifting sands of identities of indigenous people, other migrant communities, and settlers that came from colonial countries. So the indentured labor, given the geopolitics of the period in which they went in 19th century, 18th, 19th, maybe even the early 20th century, were in a position where they were sandwiched between the indigenous communities or other migrants which came to the same place, and the settlers as well. In this, there is a sort of a hierarchy which in many ways doesn't prevent an upward movement, upward mobility, and the ossification of this particular structure. But sometimes that structure also has been moving in terms of when historical changes do take place. So that's why I'm using the term shifting sands of identities. So how these particular identities are negotiated, and how negotiating between those identities has helped, has been achieved. In the case of South Africa, for example, in 1994, when the democratic government came into power, the position of Indians politically was quite strong, because that was built on the sacrifices made during the apartheid period in terms of opposing on principle and opposing in terms of tactics, and in terms of some mobilization which Gandhi did when he was in South Africa. So the shifting sense of identities is a very crucial thing, and in that particular situation, what we see here is that that could be seen as a dimension of success. So to sum up, what I see is that the success can be elusive, but because success has certain dimensions, and those dimensions are very crucial when we use the word how far have we been successful. So next slide, please. I'm just taking on. And then we're also going into how far, as all those things I've used very what one might call qualitative factors. So how far, how quickly, all this rather qualitative rather than specific quantitative or something measurable. So very often you need that particular measurement, because that is a very key aspect of measuring one's own success, progress, etc. So here I'm looking at certain markers or measures of success. So I've again got 3 points here. Recognition by countries of origin of the indentured population of the political economic advance achieved by the diasporic community. Say, for example, the countries from where they came from, how far do they recognize the success and the contribution of diasporic populations? For example, if you take the case of India, and if you take right from the beginning, or even at least from at the time Gandhi initiated certain movements in South Africa, you find that the interest has been taken by politicians, by political figures, by general populace in a large sense, in the interest taken by the pre-partition Indian National Congress. In Indian National Congress resolutions, that was a major political party at the particular time, and in conference after conference, the issue of indentured labor in India or Fiji or other places, in South Africa particularly, or mainly because of Gandhi, but also in other areas, other countries, other regions, the countries like Fiji, etc., came up. So in that particular sense, the recognition is a measure of success, and to that particular extent, this can be taken as a success. And then post-independence period, you find that there have been different levels at which the government has has recognized these things. Say, for example, different states have got diaspora conferences. Gujarat has, Tamil Nadu has, etc., etc. Then you have a central government which has Pravasi Divas, a central government initiative which recognizes these people. So to that particular extent, recognition, if it can be seen as a marker, as a measure, then we will see we could possibly have another table like what we had in the previous presentation. So my feeling is that the marker measure of success would be to what extent they are recognized, in what ways they are recognized, and how relevant it is to in the eyes of the people who would be beneficiaries, and those people are both in the diaspora, but also in India and other countries. I also include Pakistan in this particular case, Bangladesh, Pakistan, because when we are talking about indentured labor, we have to take into account that the labor recruitment also included these particular areas in some measure or the other. Then we have the last point here is success in achieving pan-diasporic identity at national, regional, and international levels, cutting across linguistic, historical, colonial divides. For example, the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center is doing an excellent work towards this particular measure of success. Here, the measure of success is to what extent diasporic experience is treated as something which is generic in some certain ways, as something which goes beyond the specificities of particular location, whether it's Fiji or Uganda, or whether it is South Africa or yet another country. So in all these things, the idea is that if we can distill a certain commonality in the diasporic experience, and that would be a clean slate from which new identities can be built. And that's why I feel that achieving that pan-diasporic identity is a crucial element of the success. Next slide, please. Okay. This is the now I mentioned that, and then I thought, being a researcher, I just wanted to think of where can we go further. And what could be new topics that would bring to light new things, new opportunities, but also new strategies. So my research has been, I did mention that, I did work on some of the archival material, and my initial interest was to explore the links between push and pull factors in diasporic migration from South Asia. And so the push and pull factors, very often the pull factors are very often these two are discussed. A lot of research is on push factors, harsh conditions, social dislocation, climate change, etc., or the particular time, famines, etc. So the links between the push factors are very often seen in isolation to some extent. And the pull factors are also seen in isolation to some extent. What did South Africa mean for them? What did a plot of land, independent land, aspirationally for a farmer or a landless peasant in India meant for them? So the pull factors also need to be looked at in diasporic migration. Of course, there were, in some cases, in some regions, in some communities, the idea of kalapani. That means, you cross the sea, and then, you lose your caste identity and so on. So apart from those things, the idea of push and pull factors, although mediated through some of these ideas, deserve further research, essentially linking the two at a micro level. Push factors, my research was on push factors from the hinterland of Chennai or Madras. That was one of the major areas through which indentured labor was sent out, and also Pondicherry, which was a French colony at that particular time. So what were the push factors at that particular time? And how did that reflect in the indentured population in South Africa mainly? And did those push factors lead to predictable outcomes or configurations of communities in South Africa? So this could be seen in other areas, for example, using Calcutta Port and Fiji, for example. So the push and pull factors, in my view, need further research, and any researcher will take that on will be welcome. And then here I need to look at one thing: the cross-cutting nature of motivations. The motivations are were social, economic, political, and climate factors. Very often the climate factor is not taken into account in terms of how the famines or how the change in climate at the particular time affected the economic viability of work at in particular locations. So we need to pay a bit more attention to the climate factors along with the economic and political factors, which rightly deserve and receive attention. The second area, which I think where further research could be done, is comparative study of diasporic and other migrations, such as slavery. Very often we seem to discuss certain diasporic experience in isolation, in many instances, not all. And then we need to possibly look at, in terms of a comparative account of how this diasporic experience other migrations. Now it was also mentioned about diasporic migration, but also passenger Indians. Passenger Indians, where they paid the traders or the people who came to South Africa paid their own fares to get to South Africa. That's why they were passengers, but the passengers paid the fare. So again, we find that this particular gap between diasporic experiences and passenger Indian or other migrations that have taken place, this particular thing might be one area where we need to look at, and also, of course, comparison with slavery would be quite helpful. So we need to disaggregate this particular diasporic population, diasporic experience, and in that particular disaggregation and comparison, we may get some new ideas. Then the last point which I want to make is the role of South Asian communities in the UK. Living in the UK, I thought about, initially my topic was, my topic was given, but I was supposed to be talking about diasporic, about UK or England. So I also reflected on what sort of research, future research could be carried out in this particular case. So the South Asian communities in the UK, Canada, and Australia, they were directly in ways linked to diasporic migration. Australia, particularly because the sugar companies that operated in Fiji have the records. If you want to do any research there, you could definitely find something in the Australian National University Library and Archives. So you find that these particular communities are in a certain privileged position, either although they may not have come to UK through direct diasporic migration in terms of indentured labor, but certainly they are in many ways have the ability to act as bridges between different communities in the diaspora. Because of the location, because of history, etc., and leveraging the shared history, culture, and experience of migration, remigration across generations. So the generational aspect, again, is very important. To what extent we can separate a generation's progress or see it in terms of a vertical progression of prosperity, of identity across generations. So these are the three topics, I think, three areas which I would recommend for future further research at any level, doctoral or postdoctoral. I think this is the last one, last category. Is there another slide, please? Okay, this is a conclusion. Yes, I need to draw the conclusion. South Asian diasporic communities, by and large, negotiated and continue to do so their position in the new locations, helped largely by the agency and resilience that they have exercised at individual and collective levels. And what I want to pay a tribute to here is the agency, is the effort, self-help, cohesion at certain levels that allowed resilience, that has allowed these communities to have a positive image of themselves, but also make positive contribution to the countries where they are at the moment. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, Dr. Bala, is that it?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Excellent.
There are
Thank
a
you
couple
very
of points
much.
which I'll bring in. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. So we have about 7 minutes for questions, and I see MK has his hand up already. So go ahead, please, MK. Please unmute your mic. MK, please unmute your mic.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Bala Subramaniam, thank you for a very sophisticated framework of reflection and analysis. What struck me is that one phrase of yours, sandwiching between shifting sense of identities of indigenous people, other migrant communities, and also other settlers who came from the colonial area. To me, this is at the heart of the entire predicament of the Asian diaspora today. We live on a continuous fault line of history. And I think that if we just judge success by how many doctors we produce, or how many cars we have, or how many houses we have, I think if we stayed in Gujarat, talking for myself, maybe we would have possibly today been better off than what we are, having left 150 years ago. I don't mean to be cynical, but I just think that the word success has to be sort of analyzed before we decide to use it as a tool. And just one more point is that also the issue of identity. I think our problem is identity, belonging, meritocratic societies that we are able to contribute towards, and also being able to participate in the process of the upkeep of democracy. I would judge the Indian diasporic plantocracy settlement by the amount of agency we have to develop those principles. That's just a comment. Thank you.
You want me to respond now, or you want me to wait?
Yes, you can go ahead and respond. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Keshevji. That's a very, I think, you picked up one of the key points about the shifting sands of identity, etc. And I find that, this is a major challenge, and the recognition of this particular challenge is, again, very important. But at the same time, when I said it is a shifting in the sense that there are areas in which these identities could be a bit more complex. Say, for example, if you, as a lawyer, you would know that Mahatma Gandhi argued in several cases in South Africa using the 1858 proclamation of Queen Victoria, that she would not discriminate between her children. In other words, colonial governments have should not be allowed to discriminate between people from different parts of the empire, our children, so to speak. So here you find again this particular the idea that there are certain complexities which allow those identities to be more fluid. And in that particular case, what I see is that that these are shifting in the sense that the ability to shift, the ability to, say, for example, in the case of South Africa, the ability to that the goodwill that Indian community was able to achieve at the point when apartheid was abolished was largely to several in community leaders and communities which participated in opposition to apartheid, and the same thing was with other countries which supported that. So what we find here is that that particular identity is shifting in the sense that the way in which the identity is looked at is recognized, or not recognized in some ways, is shifting. And it is in that particular challenge that the communities exist, the diasporic communities need that recognition and need that ability to understand, to appreciate, to negotiate these particular identities, whether they are between the different communities that I mentioned previously. So that's my response to your question. And then second one was again, you were talking about number of cars and whether it would have been better to have been in Gujarat. But again, it has to be seen in relation to which part of Gujarat society and which part of where who owns the cars, which type of cars, etc. I've been there not very recently, but certainly it has made some. There are more cars there possibly, but certainly there's a historical framework with which we need to compare. But then I appreciate that that you recognize how again the shifting sands of prosperity, etc. So the community has to be disaggregated to see the progress that's been made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jay, let's have your question quickly, please.
Just a comment and then a question. I find everybody presented okay as they thought in the 21st century in 2025, looking backwards. But I, as a second generation indentured child, my father, my grandfather, all were people from India. And since then, there were a lot of books and research and things done about the Indians and their development in South Africa. And if you look at, and some of these books are in the archives or in the libraries, but not given to the general public for education. And the question about research, the research that's done, Doc, is how did you look at it and what aspect did you look for? Taking an indentured family from a point in South India that were brought to South Africa, I'm giving you an example, and how it went through that family and what success at the end of the day and what caused the success and what are the values that they brought from India and what developed. Like my family, my grandfather was a temple builder. So there was a religion in my family. My father was a worker on a sugar boat. And my real father was a person who was in the army in India. And he came to South Africa. But going through to the child, I'm the second generation and my children will be the third generation. And we have to look at how it developed and what did we get at the end of the day. And that was success. And during that what you call journey, we had a lot of barriers, and the barriers were our own people that caused the barriers. And that is why when Mahatma Gandhi started the Natal Indian Congress in South Africa, he found out fast and furious that there was division within the Indian community. And he ended up having two organizations, one for the wealthy and one for the working class. And when he gave South Africa the Natal Indian Congress, and then the South African Indian Congress grew out of it, we found there was a development. And you find children of these members of Congress were going into education, going into business, going into sort of the skills.
Okay,
So
Jay.
looking at your research, how did you find that journey for an indentured Indian?
Okay, I'll try to be brief. This is precisely the sort of very particular, specific research or rather journey that I have been trying to map. So I was trying to identify specific villages or specific areas from which in and around Chennai, the Madras presidency, the people came from, which people went on to which ships. So I again was trying to look at some of the shipping records. No, shipping is the wrong word. The records of the ships that brought these people in the
Ships
so
registers.
they're called Indian University, or sort of the Durban University. They have those particular records which I was trying to look at. So in my effort, very specific people I should mention were helpful, like Betty Govindan, who is sometimes on this program, but also been able to speak to Fatima Mir and other people. So in that particular sense, it was again important to trace this particular trajectory of individual families, but also at the same time communities as such. They came with particular skills, as you mentioned about your family, but then when they came to new places, the new opportunities were there, and those particular opportunities were seized. And then and again, I take your point about when I use the word structure and agency, and that particular structure is not necessarily entirely alien, entirely of bureaucracy, but it is also culturally and socially limiting. And that particular limitation is also a part of the culture. The agency is how you overcome them, whether it is within the family or whether it is within a small community or whether it is politically. And in the case of South Africa, the point that you made about the two different groupings is quite understandable because of the passenger Indians and the indentured Indians. So there is sort of already a certain basis of some sorts for such a division. But it was to the credit of Gandhi that he was able to bring these factions together. And in that particular process, he also learned how to do that on a larger scale in India later on, in a different context. So basically, it's the skills they brought, the determination they brought, and the new opportunities that were there. And then that way you can map and then find out the intergenerational success.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. And the very fact that you did Chennai and Tanjore will be involved there. So I should talk to you because if you spoke to Fatima Mir, she did something on my grandfather, and I'd like to see what you found about the passenger Indians that traveled through. And I think I'll need your contact so that I can talk to you.
Okay, I'm happy to do. And then she gave a signed copy of a book on indentured, on Gandhi and the Indians, the big volume that she published. So that I would suggest as a first point, but then I'm happy to talk to you about that particular progress. Thank you.
So Dr. Bala, do we have your permission to share your contact details with Jay?
Yes, sure. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Terrific. Yeah. Thank you very much. The more this is part 2, and the more I listen to these presentations and all the details and so on, the more I realize that we have to perhaps work out a methodology to measure that success.
Sorry, what's...
The more I listen to your
sure. Yeah, okay,
presentation,
fine. Yeah.
We need to work out a methodology, a structured methodology. And your presentation was the only one, I think, so far that attempted to do that at the beginning. So very instructive. I want to thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a key area we need to take it forward.
To discuss, yes. Yeah, there's so much coming out of this, and I'm looking at the chat as well. Unfortunately, many people are leaving at this time because it's already way past 5. But there are so many questions that have arisen out of this, and I think one of the most important things that we can pull out of any topic, any discussion about any topic, is the fact that it lends to critical thinking, and that's what we've accomplished with this one. So thank you very much to you, Dr. Bala. Thank you very much to Shameen Thakur Rajbansi. Thank you as well to Babita Bahadur, all of you all who have spoken today. We really appreciate your effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shakira, please go ahead, formally end. Thanks.
Before Shakira speaks, those who are interested in going to South Africa, if you can stay on after the program, Dr. Kogi may have some updates for you. Yes, Shaki.
Okay, thank you, Kumar. And this was an excellent program today. Quite a lot of information and food for thought. And as Shalama said, definitely critical thinking coming out of this program. So we look forward to the other part of it. So we want to thank all our speakers for the sacrifice and for giving freely of their time, their expertise, their knowledge, skills. So as we said earlier, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and we are kindly asking for suggestions and volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Mahabir for details. Our topic next Sunday will be interfaith weddings in the Indian diaspora. So we want to thank our planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir and Shalama Mohammed. So please visit, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.